podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you with the cooperation of the SJ Network. If you're a person who needs a publicist and you want to appear on podcasts, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Today's guest on the Sherpa Screening Room, Marc Sheffler, was in the horror movie Last House on the Left.
Well, that's a strange coincidence.
What's a strange coincidence?
Those are the same directions I give people to get to the Sherpa Chalet. Attention, rebels of the Sherpalution. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. We would like to give you a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial simply by heading to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There are over 180,000 titles of audiobooks and podcasts, including this one, to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, the one and only Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, any similarities to podcasts that are actually funny is likely a violation of the laws of physics.
Coming to you from Sherpa Chalet in beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, it's time for entertainment interviews in the Sherpa Screening Room. Grab an aisle seat and a bucket of popcorn, but don't crunch too loud or you'll miss the show. Now, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels, and welcome to the Sherpa Screening Room. It is a presentation of Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts, by the way, if you didn't know. I am Jim, the podcast Sherpa, and these are the episodes where I get to speak to creators, folks in the entertainment industry, whether they be writers, directors, singers, actors, or like my guest today, a comedian who's an actor, who's a writer, and his name is Marc Sheffler. Now, that name may sound familiar to some of you, who may remember this spooky movie back in the 70s called Last House on the Left, which just happened to be Wes Craven's first horror film. And it's a pretty scary and disturbing horror movie, but we talked about that, and we also talked about Marc's career as a stand-up and as a comedy writer as well, and the stories that he has are really amazing, and you say to yourself, maybe he should write a book. Well, he's going to talk about that too. So just have a listen to my conversation with Marc Sheffler. Hello, Rebels. We are here in the Sherpa Screening Room with a man who was an off-Broadway actor, a stand-up comedian, a screenwriter, an author, an actor, and whose comedy future was foretold by the Three Stooges appearing at his 10th birthday party. I'm not making this up. His name is Marc Sheffler. You may remember that name from the Wes Craven horror classic, Last House on the Left. But there's so much more to this guy, and we're going to get to know him. And he's right here via video. Marc, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so now you got to share that story that you just told me about the Stooges.
Oh, geez. I only have enough energy to tell it once a day. No, I'm kidding.
This is why we have Patreon, right? If you want to hear this is why we have Patreon. If you want to hear the story, pay me $19 a month.
Now, luckily, I'm my own favorite subject, so I get to do this. So, as I told you in our little pre-show chat, I don't have like the typical come to Hollywood story where I showed up with $12 and a backpack and got a job as a waiter and did a bunch of. The day I landed in LA when I was 28 years old, I had a car waiting for me, an apartment waiting for me. I had just sold the first script I ever wrote, and William Morris was my agent, and I had an apartment, like I said, and an office, right, already. Everything was already there for me. So I mentioned to you that that was one of many of those unbelievably what the fuck lucky things that happened to me along the way that kind of took me from dreaming about doing what I do to, being 73 and looking back and say, well, I had a really nice career doing what I love, right? So I had an out-of-the-box father, this wacky aluminum siding salesman guy, right? And he had a theory that if you could dream it, you could do it. And this is something that he imparted to me like on a daily basis. So in the run up to my 10th birthday, he said to me, 10 years old, double digits, a new decade, and he said something interesting to me then. He said, this is a very interesting decade for you because you go into it a boy, but when it's over, you'll be a young man. And this is a big trend. So let's give you something special for your birthday. What do you want? So, being a child, a young man of my era, I just blurted out, I want the Three Stooges. And my father said, well, okay, let me see what I can do. So he made some phone calls and knew some people and, eventually boiled down to my birthday's in September, and he found out the Stooges were going to be at the Holiday House, a nightclub near Pittsburgh, where I grew up, in January, early January, starting actually in December, but December into January. So he said to me, look, you have a choice. If you can wait until that time, you can wait the 3 months, you can have what you want. I can get them. So I said, yeah, of course. And suddenly I had a birthday party booked at the Holiday House in January of 1959 and early January. And I had about 60 people, friends and family and friends of family who couldn't believe that some guy hired the Three Stooges to perform for their son. Remember, this is 1959. They were like a big act, right? Sure. So we're in parties going on, and Stooges are up on stage doing their act, and in the middle of it, Mo stopped it, and he looked at the audience and he said, "Well, we're all here to celebrate Marc's birthday. Where's Marc?" So I'm at a table with my father and his girlfriend and some other people, my younger sister. And I raised my hand, and he says, "Marc, why don't you come up on the stage with us?" I didn't know what to do. 10 years old. My father looked at me and said, "Get your ass up on that stage." And I said, "Sure." So up I went, and I knew all of their stuff. I was scared to death. I say scared. I was scared, but at the same time, I felt unusually comfortable. So it's like nervous, but in a comfortable place, right? Stage lights in my eyes. I couldn't see out. All I could see was the stage and the Stooges. So I went over to them, and I knew their stuff. So I was so nervous. Shit just started to come out. Their material. So Mo picked up on it, and he started doing it. And then Larry and Curly Joe DeRita, and suddenly, like, I'm interacting with the Three Stooges, right? So Mo stops that because everybody's laughing and applauding, puts his hand on my head and says, "I dub you the fourth Stooge." And everybody went nuts, they screamed and applauded. This is what I heard. Because remember, I told you I couldn't see anything. The lights were in my eyes, but it felt, Jim, it felt warm, like, oh man, it's like what these people who go to opium dens must feel when they go, "Mr. Wong, they're like that. That's what it felt like. I was like comforted. So, I told you I was writing a book about my life, a fictionalized version. Then I have to unfictionalize it for my agent, but I'm fictionalizing it in the writing of it. And it occurred to me that was the day where I just decided to aim myself towards, show business, entertainment. That's what I wanted to do. That's all I ever wanted to do.
It literally called you on the stage. I mean, yes. As opposed to more people where they think I should try, you would just say, "Well, come on up, Marc." Yeah,
no. It's like I've had so many of these moments. Like I dropped out of college in 1969. I was going to LSU. I went to school with David Duke, actually. Yeah, right. So I was going to go to California right away. And my father said, "No, eventually, but not now." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "You got to go to New York. Go find yourself a job in the Catskill Mountains. That's where all the stand-up comedy is. That's where the best comedians work. Just go there. You'll find a job." So he bought me a plane ticket, and he even hired a limo to take me from LaGuardia Airport up to Monticello, New York. Right. So I ended up getting a job at the Catskill at a hotel in the Catskills called the Raleigh, big hotel. And I got a job, bullshitted my way onto the athletic staff for like July 4th weekend, 1969. And 3-day gig. I had no place to go after that. So while I was there, I very quickly, when your dad's an aluminum siding salesman, you learn how to like do things mentally, like very fast, because that's part of the whole that's part of that game, right? And so I figured out who was who in this hotel, who had the power, who the boss was, yada, yada, yada. And it turned out that the boss of the hotel, even though it had owners, but the guy who really ran the hotel was this very cool kind of Jewish Frank Sinatra guy called Ziskin, right? And he was just the best, right? He was the best. And Zalkin, rather. I'm sorry, Zalkin. So Sid Zalkin. So he liked me like immediately. So I hear through the grapevine that the guy that the hotel hired to be their stage manager to run the nightclub took a better job. So I kind of got myself in front of Sid's face and said I could do that job. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I was a drama major in college. We had to do lights and sound, And I lied. It was total bullshit, right? And he was a nice guy, but survival was survival. So, but I was very convincing because I was an acting major. So I was kind of like acting like I had done all that stuff. So he gave me the job. He said, "Look, I'll hire you for a week and I'll keep my eye on you. And if you do okay for the week, you can have the job for the summer." So I went to the stage and I learned the equipment like in a day because it's all basically the same. You just, certain things are different, but it's pretty much the same. And I managed to pull it off, right? And there I was, like part of the executive staff. I was the stage manager of the nightclub. And I met every comedian and watched every comedian in that circuit over and over and over again. And it was like postgraduate school for stand-up comedy. And then I became friends with a guy named London Lee, a comedian who worked the hotel. And I don't know, maybe 6 months, 7 months after that, he offered me the job of his to be his road manager. So I said goodbye to the Raleigh and thank you. It was great. And went to New York and worked for him for about a year, doing club dates, part of his act, being on stage, getting experience, going to clubs in New York at night. And then I left him after 2 weeks at the Copa. And about a month after I left him, I got Last House.
Yeah, like you were saying, it's really like stepping stones from one spot into another.
Yeah, and trust me when I tell you, whenever there was downtime in my career, as it started to roll, I look back and I know, well, it was because I fucked up somewhere. It was like I otherwise it would have kept rolling in that direction. I had to, but still, it's weird shit. I sold the first script I ever wrote. Are you kidding? No, I have writer friends in Hollywood, pals of mine, working writers, guys I've known for decades. Their nickname for me is The Myth, because it's a myth that somebody sells the first script they ever write, moves to Hollywood, and then actually has a career after that.
So tell me a little bit about when you got into Last House on the Left. I mean, I know it was a bit of a different kind of movie experience. It was Wes Craven's first movie, and you said it was kind of like guerrilla filmmaking, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, because Wes's first film, Sean had produced a semi-documentary, like a pseudo-documentary, one before that. The crew had made movies, obviously, before. The only one of the cast who actually knew what they were doing film-wise was Fred Lincoln, right? He was the only one who played Weasel. And Freddie was kind of like the unsung hero of Last House because he had the most experience, and he helped Wes a lot with a lot of the setups and, camera angles, and, Freddie helped with the blocking. So I just want to give a shout out to the late Fred Lincoln, who was an extraordinary contributor to Last House.
That movie, I mean, in terms of violence, it's hard to it's hard to watch because it's really over the top of it. It really sets the stage for a lot of other future horror movies too, using that type of violence as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Last House, I hate to say, I must have been like a real idiot when I was younger, because I've come to understand Last House in a whole different light over the years, right? Mm-hmm. Like, initially, my feelings about it were that nobody would ever go to see it because it was just such a violent, distasteful piece of shit, right? But people did come to see it. Roger Ebert wrote an amazing 3.5 out of 4-star review. That's what took us out of drive-ins and put us into mainstream theaters. So what I've learned over the years, and truthfully, I've learned it from fans. They've been my teachers. The people who are diehard Last House on the Left fans because they obviously saw things that I didn't. And I would say the sum total of my post-experience education with the film has come from fans. They're the ones. And everything from parents who told me that they made their kids watch it because it teaches them what can happen if they make a bad decision, to children who say, my parents made me watch this because they wanted me to know what could happen if I made a bad decision, to, soldiers telling me it helped them decompress from, violent missions in Iraq. I mean, I got that at Texas Frightmare. Somebody grabbed me and told me that. So I've come to understand that it's a film about class warfare and that it's a skirmish it's a skirmish between the haves and the have-nots in the ongoing battle of class warfare. And the fact that Collingwood wins in the end with the chainsaw is a metaphorical example that the ruling class always prevails.
I was just realizing that you're probably going to be the only person I'll ever interview who's worked with both Wes Craven and Mel Blanc.
Well, to be honest, I didn't work directly with Mel Blanc, but I did do the Bugs Bunny special for sure.
Okay.
I like to be straight, honest about shit. So I didn't work directly with Mel Blanc, but he did apparently record stuff that I wrote. So
what was Wes Craven like to work with? I mean, being that it was his first movie, he was probably a young, hungry filmmaker.
Okay. So what I tell people when I get asked that question is that you have to put everything in context. Wes Craven wasn't Wes Craven at the time. He was this tall, skinny, stringy, blonde-headed guy named Wes, right?
Okay.
So he became Wes Craven after Last House and other films.
Right, building his reputation, right.
But that's a big thing because, first of all, Wes is a terrific guy. I saw him about a year before he passed away. And we had a wonderful, 20-minute conversation, just the two of us. And he was, back then, a delightful young man. And, the times that I saw him through the years, he was very friendly, very nice, always the same guy, but, it's like, Wes falls into the category of never changed, right? You know who Marc Summers is, from Double Dare?
Yeah, right. Okay, the game show host, sure.
Yeah, Marc and I are like best friends. We've been friends for decades, right? So we play a game every now and then. We play a game with each other called Change or Don't Change, and we talk about famous people we know from before they were famous, right? And who changed and who didn't. And to the credit of most of them, the vast majority of people never just don't change. They're just nice people then. They're nice people now. Few dicks, but who cares? You can't. That's the way it is. But Wes was one of those guys who never changed. Just a nice guy always.
You associate him with all these crazy horror movies, and you kind of wonder what kind of mind does he have. But like you said, he's probably just a regular guy, that's a job, right?
That's it. That's another thing I say to people. I said, look, the way I sum up all the famous people I know and have worked with is just to say that they're just regular people with irregular jobs. Mm-hmm. That's it. But nothing more than that.
Sure.
And most of them are just literally just worry about the same shit that everybody else worries about. They have more toys, right? People have more toys. They have more control over the time of their lives and just, other shit like that. That's part of it. But mostly they're just, regular people.
Was there anyone that you've known in your career that had an impact on you, would you say?
Well, starting out, the Three Stooges. Mm-hmm. Okay. My father, a comedian who just passed away recently by the name of Stewie Stone, who opened for like Engelbert and Frankie Valli and a bunch of people. Stewie was like first Big Brother comedy to me, right? In comedy. London Lee, who gave me a chance to stand on a stage in front of 1,500 people and then allowed me to be part of his act when he was at the Copa and I was working for him. Wes, Frankie Valli, I don't know about being an influence, but a good friend. Well, creatively, like Woody Allen, Neil Simon, Jackie Mason, comedians whose material and performance I just think it's amazing.
Mhm.
So yeah, we're all influenced by everything that came before us,
Right.
whether we acknowledge it or not. Nobody born now makes this shit up, right? You walk onto a moving sidewalk staircase and, you can stay on and do well, great, but you didn't fucking invent the staircase, right?
That is very true. Now, Mark, you, in your wondrous career, even in your time as a stand-up, you got involved with a pretty impressive group of comics.
Yeah, you would say that, right?
At the Comedy Store.
Yeah, I'm what's known as an original paid regular there, which means that I was performing at this Comedy Store before the strike in 1979, and then I was performing there after the strike in 1979. So I'm part of the original crew. I'm actually, more specific than that, part of the class of 77 with Robin Williams and Jay Leno and David Letterman and Michael Keaton and Keenan Ivory Wayans and Jimmy Walker, Tom Dreesen, Tim Reed, a few people, Marsha Warfield, Mark Summers, a few people.
That's such an interesting time in comedy's history too, because that was when right before that comedy club boom and stand-ups were really making the rounds. And
we were the first of the golden age of comedy. We kicked off the most recent golden age of comedy. I guess I could say it like that. Yeah, it was an amazing time. I mean, every night I was hanging out with Letterman and Robin and Jay and going from the Comedy Store to the Improv and back and forth and, performing all over town. And we were all like running around and just doing clubs here and clubs there, but mostly anchoring at the store or at the Improv. And it was wild. It was just magnificent.
Was there any special memories that you had when you were performing at these clubs?
I could tell you a Robin Williams story.
Sure.
So this is obviously pre-Mork, right?
Okay.
This story is pre-Mork. So I'm at Sunset one night and I see Robin in the back, like walking around. It's like 11:30ish. He's walking around and I said hello and I said, what's wrong? And yeah, sorry, man, I'm freaked out. I lent my car to somebody and I got a 12:15 spot in Westwood and I can't make it. I don't have, now I'm about to call them and tell them. And I said, no, I'll take you. No worries. I'm not, I'm good. So we get in the car and we drive over there. Robin walks in and we walk into the Comedy Store Westwood and there are 3 people in the audience, 3 people.
Okay.
Robin gets up on the stage and does exactly, if not better, a show than he would do if there were 103 people in there. And we're getting back in my car to go over to Sunset and pick up his car. And I looked at him and I said, that was a really good show you did tonight. And Robin was a sweet, humble, very down to another guy never changed, right? Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, oh, Mr. Sheffler, that's so nice of you to say. And I said, no, not that you could do a good show. Everybody knows that. It's just that you did the same show for those 3 people that you would have done for 103 people. And in the most innocent, childlike, waifish way, he just looked at me and said, well, yeah, you gotta. And like, what a lesson, right? What a fucking lesson. I mean, I sort of knew it anyway, but just to hear it from him, Robin was the purest performer I had ever seen in my life. I mean, that was my impression from the first time I saw him. And that's my impression all these years later. He was the purest natural performer. Like there are a lot of really good people, but he was like I knew him well enough that I knew that when he wasn't performing, he was very uneasy. Right. He wasn't, he really was that guy that would perform, if the light of a refrigerator went on. No, he would. He was a terrific guy and, wherever he is, if he's anywhere, I wish him well,
I guess that was where his heart was at. When he hopped on stage, that's probably where everything came together for him. Yeah,
he was one night, he was doing Mork at Paramount when I was there doing another sitcom. And I see him on the lot one day and he said, hey, you going to be at the Improv tonight? And I said, yeah. He said, you want to have dinner together? I said, yeah, sure. So I said, I'll get there about 7. He said, yeah, somewhere around there. I'll be there around that too. So I get there like a quarter to 7. He gets there around 7:10 and we sit down at a table. So we order something, we order like a pizza and some other shit. And somebody comes in that he wanted to talk to. He said, hey, I'll be right back. I said, no, you won't. He said, what do you mean? I said, just go. So he gets up and he goes, and now the club starts to fill up and Robin's running around the room. And he's not even performing on stage right now. He's just going around to pockets of people testing out material. Right. And I eat some of my pizza and a salad and everything. And I really never see him the rest of the night. He gets up on stage, he does a set, then he goes out and he's partying with somebody. And so I never see him the rest of the night. So at the end, when I'm getting ready to go home, I said to the waitress, I said, I'll take my check. And she said, oh, no, Robin took care of it. So, that's the kind of guy he was. He was just, he was a sweet kid. He was like a good guy.
So you, I guess, eventually gravitated from stand-up to doing comedy writing.
Well, it's not even so much gravitated. Like, I had sold a script. I think I mentioned that to you. I sold the first script I ever wrote, right? So I had William Morris as an agent, and they're the ones that got me in at the Comedy Store, because Mitzi didn't know who the hell I was and could care less if I sold the script, or, could care less at all the shit I did back east as far as stand-up. And I don't fault her for that. It was her club, and that's how she ran it. So William Morris was able to get me a time certain on a Monday night, which is potluck night, open mic night. But I won't have to stand in line. So I go there a couple of weeks before I'm supposed to go on, and I happen to catch Steve Bluestein and Tim Thomerson on the same stage, like on the same show. And they were so fucking good, I almost quit. I said, nah, I can't do this shit. Because they were Bluestein was just so good at what he was doing, and Thomerson was just a fucking maniac. I really was thinking, look, I have a nice career starting as a writer. What do I need this shit for? Right. So then I said, nah, I can't, because I knew that like 5 minutes of that Catskill stuff that I was doing, I would have like flushed my own toilet here. It wouldn't have worked. It just wasn't going to work. The audience would just a whole other thing. So it challenged me to go and write new material. Right. So I wrote a new 5 minutes. First night I did it there. It went really well. Mostly everything worked. I was like not committed to the material because it was brand new and I was just working on it. But I was able to bluff my way through it. They invited me back same time. I go back the second time. I do some rewriting. I tweak it. I see where, shit I got to let go and then tighten it. And it's exponentially better, right? So they invite me back again for the following week. That one night, that third night I was there, it was just hot. It was just a hot night. All the comedians were doing great. Everybody was in front of me. I had a 10:30 time spot or something like prime cherry spot like that. And Mitzi Shore, the owner of the club, happened to be in her booth showcasing somebody else. She was there to showcase somebody else. So I go on, and the comedian in front of me had done very, very well. So the audience was like way up here. And at that point, all you have to do is just not lose them, right? Like, just keep them there. You do well, but just don't lose them. So I go on, and my material is tight as shit right now. And I squeezed every fucking laugh out of that 5 minutes of material. Dude, there was just sand on the floor by the microphone. It was dry. There was nothing left. And I walked off to huge applause. And I see Mitzi in her booth, and she's looking at the audience, laughing and applauding. I thought to myself, I have nothing to lose. So I went over to her and I said, hey, Mitzi, does it really have to get any better than this? And she just looked at me and she said, all right, Marc, call in for spots. And that's how I became a regular at the store in like 3 weeks, and that's an example of, going after it, not just leaving things to chance. If you can do what you say you can do, then just fucking go after it.
Tell me a little bit about like writing for TV as well. I know you did like Charles in Charge and Who's the Boss?
Yeah, lots of those shows. So what happened was while I was doing stand-up, my agents and managers, I picked up a manager at the Comedy Store, Marty Littke's office. Peter Gianni was working with me. I met him through Jeff Altman, right? Another comedian.
Sure.
And
Pink Lady and Jeff.
They were sending me around to meet producers right before pilot season. And I made an impression on a bunch of them because when it came time to hire, I was started to get job offers. So first one I took was How Bugs Bunny Won the West, because it was unique, right? And I'd always wanted to write for Bugs Bunny, so I got a chance to do that. And I did that at Warner Brothers and proved to be a wonderful gig. And then I wrote a couple of sitcoms. I wrote at Sanford, and I wrote Love Boat, and I wrote a couple of other things. And suddenly I was on staff at a show. I went on staff, and that show got canceled. And then I went on another staff, and then I did a movie of the week during that time for somebody. I was just going from gig to gig. It was amazing. It was, wow. I never, I sort of took it for granted because it just all happened so kind of effortlessly.
To state the obvious, funny. You've got the background and everything like that, and obviously the talent. What makes you laugh?
My wife, my children at times, certain comedians. John Mulaney, I think, is hysterical. Some people, I think are funny. Some people I don't think are funny. I think there are too many comedians now. I think we've reached that point where the moment somebody can't figure out what they do in life, they call themselves a comedian. And since a lot of millennial comedians have mastered the art of telling a joke without a punchline, I think it leaves the arena wide open for a lot of people because you don't have to be that funny.
Do you have any advice for any aspiring comics or comedy writers?
Sure. Move to LA or New York. If you're anywhere else, you're just tap dancing. No, because there's no one anywhere else who can do anything for your career other than in New York or LA. And if you're doing stand up, the advice is the same. Go to New York or LA, hang out at the Comedy Store and the Improv, and really go after it. Because to say that, you're the number one comic in Rockville, someplace, Nebraska, is like, who cares? And not that there's anything wrong with that if that's what somebody wants to do, right? There's no value judgment there. But the thing that people don't really understand or maybe don't want to understand, even when it goes well and easily, it requires an extraordinary commitment. Like my wife is a Colombian woman, many, many years younger than me. Okay. Second wife, right? And we've been together quite a while. We've been together close to 20 years. And she lives a duality in her relationship with me. She loves the fact that I am a writer, but she fucking hates it when I write. She loves my husband's a writer and he's writing a book and he's doing this and that. And then in the reality is, why do you have to write so damn much? Why you have to do this? Why you have to do this? Why? Well, I'm a writer. I'm that guy you like to talk about. I actually have to write something. Otherwise, I'm a fake writer. And she's an extraordinarily bright and wonderful person. But, it's like living with Lucy and Desi in the same body, right? That's who she is. She's a combination of those two people. She's my muse, right? She's just my muse.
I like that. Especially after all those years together, that's got to say something about her.
Oh yeah. The fact that because I'm completely ridiculous to live with. I have voices going on in my head. I carry on conversations with people. I'm listening to other people in my head have conversations. It's not easy, it's just, I know it. And I it's like, I remember once she was having a conversation with my daughter, who's not her mother, right? Not her daughter. She's my daughter from my first marriage. And she was saying to my daughter, your dad's nuts. It's like all these people, he's talking to people in his head and he's listening to voices and, he has conversations with them and he writes down what they say and it's weird. And my daughter looked at her and said, yes, so that's my dad. It's always been like that.
All right. So I want to kind of come full circle and get back to your book. Now, what did you say the title of your book was going to be?
A Dumb Effing Luck.
I was curious if you could maybe share one more little story that you're going to include in the book just for a little sneak peek. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. There's a section of the book, a 7-year section of the book. When I was 14, living with my father, His cousin was the general manager of all the Stanley Warner theaters in the Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia tri-state area. And his office was in a beautiful old kind of converted vaudeville house, now movie theater house called the Stanley in Pittsburgh. No longer there, but it was in this time. So in 1963, my father and I were watching The Nutty Professor, Jerry Lewis and The Nutty Professor. Mm-hmm. The movie was over and I was just floored. I said to my dad something like, Jerry Lewis is the funniest guy in the world. And as we were walking out, my father told me that I said something to him like, what must it be like to be in the movies? Like, what a job that must be. How much fun that must be to, like, that's your job, right? You're in the movies. So my dad said to me, well, maybe you'll find out one day. And I said, what are you talking about? Me in the movies? What? And my father looked at me and he had this like funny, serious thing. He said, hey man, he said, somebody does that every day of the week. Why not you? And I really didn't have an answer, right? So, I said to him, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. One of these days, I'm going to star in a film that's going to be up on this screen right here in this theater. And my father said to me, okay, if you do that, I'll go to the premiere with you and I'll rent a limo. So my father and I made this little deal, right? These were the terms of the deal. Mm-hmm. So I was 14 at the time, right? 7 years later, right after Roger Ebert's review, I get a call from the publicity people for Last House. And they say to me, you're from Pittsburgh, right? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we're opening, right after the Roger Ebert review, it went from like 30 screens to like 1,000, right? Mm-hmm. So they said, we're opening in Pittsburgh. And how'd you like to go back and do some publicity for us? And then just go to the premiere and we'll pay for, we'll pay for everything. And I said, fine. I said, by the way, what theater is it opening up in Pittsburgh? And he said, hang on, let me look. It's called the Stanley. You know it? Said, wow. Just fucking wow. Wow. So I called my dad and I told him, and I said, you remember our deal, right? He said, oh yeah. He said, I'll have that limo waiting for you. And so that's a story that's in the book. That takes us from we follow the path from that promise to the realization of it, the unlikely realization of it.
I think you've truly given the definition to a charmed life, Mark.
No, listen. I'm telling you, man, that's just some of it, right? No, I've only been hit on by one in my entire career in show business, like that started when I was, a kid. I've only been hit on by one gay man, but the one gay man who hit on me was Liberace. So that was like 1,000 other gay men hitting on me, right? Combined into one massive pass by Liberace. And it was in front of it. It was right in front of Engelbert Humperdinck. So I had witnesses. So there were a lot of people there when it happened. But I've had so much like that. Like you just like, and that's what I'm writing about.
Well, this is going to be a book that I'm sure lots of people are going to be looking for. When it comes out, let me know, and I will let everybody know on my social pages.
I hope to have a draft from my agent by February, and then it's all cutting and chopping after that. So
his name is Marc Sheffler. Marc, thank you so much for spending time with us.
Oh no, thank you for having me.
Be a rebel. Follow the show at Sherpalution on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Thank you so much to Marc Sheffler for coming by the Sherpa Screening Room, and thank you to you for spending some of your time listening to this interview. And we always have fun every week, don't we? Right here at the Sherpa Chalet. If you'd like to hear more, you know what you can do. Just listen on your favorite podcast app, or maybe one that you don't like so much. Just get even with it. Or you could even go to my website, Sherpalution.com. And just keep saying to yourself, it's only a podcast. It's only a podcast. Well, if you saw Mark's movie, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, if you'd like to follow me on social media, Sherpalution is also the word for that. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I'm there. If you want to find out what's going on with the show. And if you'd like to say hello, please do that. And if you'd like to email me a comment, you can also email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com. And after you're doing all that for the show, Or if you've done none of that, if you could, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave this podcast a nice review. And subscribe, so this way all the shows automatically come to you just like that. Wow, I snap my fingers. Wow, I have talent. Anyway, this is Jim the Podcast Sherpa saying so long, and I will see you guys next week. Mr. Bruce, we got to sweep up the last of this popcorn, and we will see you next time. And until then, you know what I say. Viva la Sherpalution.
Thanks for listening to the Sherpa Screening Room. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. I'm Mr. Bruce, and this has been a Sherpalu Studios production. Viva la Sherpalution!